Good morning.
Morning.
Good
Morning.
morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to the HR Morning Show. Everybody who's out there, this is, I would say, and I'm not biased in any way, but the number one place to get all your HR news. Is a cool place to hang out. So we would love, as always, for you out there to get into the chat. And we have a special guest host today. Rona, welcome. Welcome in.
Welcome.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here today.
Well,
We're
it's great.
excited to have you, honestly. You bring the pink. You brought the pink. We needed more
Yeah,
pink in the
yeah.
room.
We always need more pink in the room.
We always do, honestly. And if you have not seen Rona's latest rebrand of her podcast, it is truly incredible. You can also catch Rona on the Alder Hour every Monday. But Rona, why don't you, for anyone who doesn't know you, which they should, can you share a little bit more about who you are and what you do best?
Yes. So I've been in the TA industry for a few years. I'm originally a software engineer and I moved into TA. I was pushed into TA and loved it. And now I've always done a lot of like employer branding type stuff. So now I actually run a video content agency where I help companies just attract talent. And I also have a podcast, like Danielle was saying, it's the Workfluencer podcast, where I speak to creators in our space and just people who are changing how we talk about work. And I'm also on the Alder Hour, which is another Purple Acorn show that I love. So yeah.
I love it. Honestly, I feel like you're serving such a need in the market. Like I feel like the whole B2B influencer space, I'm very much in the because I came from marketing. So I'm still in the marketing world and I really understand where how influencers have evolved. But now that it's coming into like B2B and B2B influencers, linked influencers are like all the rage. I feel like there's not enough talk on that end and also in the talent attraction space. So like how could you leverage other people's brands and also brand and influence within your own company to attract people to want to work for you and work with you? I think it's so smart.
Yeah, and that's really one of the reasons why I made this rebrand and change because it's what's happening, but there's not enough information, I think, in our niche about how to do it. There's a lot of people talking about how to be a creator in general. There's some people talking about how to be a B2B creator, but what do you do when what you create serves two very different audiences? Because yeah, we're attracting clients and stuff like that, but also talent. It's very different. So that's really why I decided to do that pivot. And also, I mean, with Gen Z mostly and lots of millennials, people are talking about work online, and there's no real guidance for companies. Like some have jumped on it, others are like, oh, we don't like this. So it's kind of like exposing what's really happening and how it's working for other people so that just everyone can jump on board.
Yeah, it's really smart. I love it, and I love the branding.
Mhm.
I'm a big pink lover. But yeah, I'm so excited. What are you like really excited about in the space? What are you noticing? Are there certain companies that are being specifically innovative that you've been working with or keeping an eye on in this space?
Yeah, there's definitely companies that I've been keeping an eye on. I won't name them because some things have changed internally for them, but there's definitely companies who have hired like their own influencers, which I'm kind of like, is this how it's going to work, or is it going to be more like people who do it on their own? I don't know. So I'm like watching the space in that aspect, but there's definitely companies, especially in this economy, really looking at how they can still attract talent for the least amount of money. Because let's face it, that's what companies want to do. And then using their own employees and the voice of their employees is a way to do it. And I see it as a like win-win because as an employee, if you're doing it, even if you don't end up working for that specific company forever, it's still your brand. You're still building your brand, and that's going to work for you for wherever you go. So it's a
Yeah,
win-win.
I've heard people say it's like the best career insurance you could have as a personal brand.
Yes,
Yeah.
100%.
I love it.
Life insurance. No, I love that too. Well, it's great to have you here. You are a member of the Purple Acorn family, which is amazing. And as a reminder, guys, I think all of us are a part of the Purple Acorn family. And if you're not, you need to check out purpleacornnetwork.com. Follow us on LinkedIn. I mean, look, I've been asking for follow.
Other people
I want to hit that.
answering.
I'm gonna hit that 2,000. If we don't hit that 2,000, I'm gonna start paying for followers, right? So I never. But do us a favor, go follow us on LinkedIn. And the reason I say this is because one of the things that we do is we put out a lot of content from shows. So I know sometimes, not everybody's able to tune in for the full like hour to each show. If you want to just keep, you know, in the know of like what we're talking about, who we're interviewing, following us really, really does help. Uh,
Yeah.
and we are a podcast too. We're not just a podcast, we're a podcast network. So whatever you're looking for, if you're looking for how to manage different generations, if you're looking for all the news in recruitment, HR, whatever it is, the world of work, we have something for everyone. So go check out the
And
podcast network.
yeah, and Joel, by the way, I want to say something.
Uh-oh.
There's a little bit of chatter online about the show and, people on the show. And you know what I want to say is that this show, the conversations that we're having, the guests we're bringing on is so innovative that it might not fit everyone. And if you don't want to follow us, that's fine. But if you're an innovative person in HR, TA, DEI, wherever you might lie, you're a hiring manager, you definitely want to tune into this show because this is where the innovators like Rona are not only logging on to help us host the show, which by the way, thank you so much, but we also have incredible guests, authors, HR people across all of the functions in HR that are joining the show every
We
day.
haven't had anyone in payroll. I want to get a
Oh,
payroll
we need a
specialist.
payroll benefits person. That's for sure.
We've had benefits,
But
I
we're
don't
thinking
know.
about this. We're innovative. We're always thinking about how we can up the game, and I think that that's the most important thing, right? Is like that we're bringing really heavy hitters onto the show, and I'm just excited for what is to come.
I love it. I love it. And we're doing lots of live activities as well. So we're excited for what's to come. We're excited for this week's episode with Rona. So Rona, welcome. I think we're gonna jump into our headline for the week. So let's roll the headlines.
Do it. All right, all right, all right. So this headline comes from the infamous Sherm, but, and I say but, we are talking about, I guess, like one of the foundational conversations that always comes up. How can recruiters help hiring managers hire better? Obviously, a lot is changing in the talent market. I've been hearing about deep fakes. I've been hearing about AI, recruiting. And I've been hearing about a lot of different things, and a lot is changing. And I think, you know, I might get some flack for this, but I think now's the time to talk about the foundational things and bring everyone back to earth. So the three ways that they talk about: A, build a collaborative hiring plan. B, providing data-driven insights to your hiring managers, and C, understanding the business goals at large. And also, the micro and the macro, as I like to say, as a social scientist. And I think, these are pretty basic. I'm curious what you guys both have to say, because you are both in recruiting, have been in recruiting, about this topic.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's foundational. I think we've talked about this forever, about how to work better with hiring managers. I think now, in the age of AI and like automation and all the tools that we have at our disposal, that old excuse of, yeah, I would love to be more strategic, but I don't have time is like gone away. Like it's not a thing anymore, because if you are a smart recruiter, you can like leverage the tools that you have at your disposal to then really focus on the basics. This article spoke about like go faster because every hiring manager wants the process to move faster. Sure, that's really nice to say, but that's not like, I think tangible advice for someone's like, go faster. I see it as build a pipeline. So again, create content, be out there speaking, like have it so that when you reach out to candidates, it's not this whole like, who are you that you start from, right? And then obviously knowing the business, that's something that we spoke about for years and years and years, but how can you really recruit? I personally don't know how to recruit without knowing the business, because you're talking to a candidate about the business, right? You need to, one, know it to find the right people, and two, to like bring the, like be able to answer their questions, right? And then bringing the insights. I'm very, again, like a engineer mind, very data driven, but like don't only bring the data, know what it means and what it means for that specific hiring manager. I think where I see lots of recruiters, it's like, yeah, let's use the data, and they just present the data. That doesn't mean anything. It's like you have to have the conversation and make that data turn into information for your hiring managers.
Yeah, 100%. You gotta be able to tell a story, right? Like, a
Yeah.
data without stories data without insights is just numbers on a page, and it points to something, but what does it point to? And I think one of the things I've noticed, and I think you mentioned it, right? Like, you're a software engineer pushed into recruiting, right? And a lot of people, it's you're pushed into it, you fell into it. I went to a staffing agency and they said, "Oh, you'd be great with people. You'd be a great recruiter." And I was just looking for a job, and now I'm a recruiter. And I think fundamentally the challenge with that is if that's the entrance for a lot of people, which it has been, you then lose that insight into the business piece because it gets reduced to how good are you with people. And I think when you look at Canada experience is an all-time low right now. Technology, I think, can handle a decent amount of people interactions. It seems like that's what candidates are even opting in for, going, "Hey, I'm open to being able to do a screening call with AI." I'm open to being able to schedule a screening call whenever I want, whatever fits into my schedule at my own pace. I'm open to not necessarily dealing with a human in certain aspects. So you go, okay, it's not just about being a people person. I think the business insights, the culture insights, the understanding the people, understanding the team, understanding the business is crucial. And so I think we're going to see a lot more of this emphasis on advising. What does advising look like? And in order to be an advisor, you have to know something, right? Like, no one goes to an advisor that doesn't know anything. You don't go to a financial advisor that doesn't know anything about the market. So I think there's going to be more of an emphasis on that. And I think the way that we bring people into talent acquisition, it may change. I don't think it's I think it's right that that happens, because I also think you have to have a good knowledge of not only how does the business run, but how does technology intersect with the business, and what are we actually trying to achieve? And I think those are conversations that some of us lean into, and there are others that go, "All right, that sounds confusing. I don't really know what I'm talking about," and they kind of step back. And so I
Yeah.
think those that are like really lean in, you're curious, wanting to learn, wanting to be a student. And then I would just argue that this is not just a recruiting thing. It goes across the board. I
Yeah.
think every employee, if you don't know how your business operates, then it's hard to know what your value is within the business. So I think it's understanding that it's not just whether you're in recruiting, it's marketing, it's HR. If you think you're just in a silo that's not impacting the business, it's a fundamental mistake. I think all of us need to have an understanding of the businesses we
And
serve. So
you're ready to be laid off.
Yeah, exactly. That's it's like if you think that you're
Or
just
you're
a
a
silo
silo.
in your own little world, then you're the first person, like even on your list, you should be the first person for a layoff.
Yeah. And I think also like these tools can especially these a lot of companies are building internal systems like ChatGPT just for their business. And I think that's amazing for the business at large, but it's also amazing for the people because for the first time you'll have a resource that really understands your business that you work in and that you could rely on and lean on to pull insights that will help you with things just like this, right? With advising hiring managers, with the right data, with the right, cross-functional teams, with the right stakeholders in mind. Like I think that's so key. And I think it will be a huge part of the future of how, not just to your point, not just how hiring teams or talent acquisition functions, but I think everyone in the company.
Yeah,
Yeah.
someone there was a prediction. Oh, sorry, Ronnie, you go ahead.
No, I was gonna say to your point when you were talking about, like, how people have been pushed or how people have got into recruiting, yeah, it's true, but I think after you get into a role, any role, and that's whatever industry, it's your responsibility to really, like, learn and learn what you need to stay there and be someone valuable, otherwise, you're just that
Yeah.
disposable person every time.
I think that's what we've seen, right? And that's a lot of chatter right now. There's two types of things that I've heard recently. We heard that bloodbath with entry level jobs. Now, I don't think that I think people can go, well, that means people who are entry level aren't going to get jobs. And I'm like, well, no, I think those people will get jobs because they want to work, they're eager to work. It's just entry level looks different because to Danielle's point, you don't have to be so entry level. If you have a tool that knows your business and you can ask it questions, you
Hmm.
then kind of elevate yourself automatically into more of like a non entry level role because you have a resource
Yeah.
that entry level people didn't have in the past. And then secondly, that middle manager layer now, talking a lot about middle managers. So just to give like a picture of what that potentially could look like, I've been at I've been at an enterprise company for 10 years and I've gone through lots of changes and I don't necessarily know like what value I'm bringing to the business. I think, I'm very processed and I'm doing a lot of meetings.
Hmm.
Those people, to your point, are at risk. But I would put some of that responsibility on the business, and
Yeah.
so I think it's a little bit of both, right? It's like I think as a business, you can't just say, "Oh, as an employee, you just got to learn independently." I think it has to be like a harmony involved of like, "Hey, we're going to invest in you and we're going to help you grow." And then as employees, like you have your own individual responsibility. So if you're not in a company like that, to me, it's a red flag. Like if your
Yeah.
company is not investing in you, so it's an interesting time for sure. I don't know how we got from like 3 ways to help hiring managers to like
Well, I think being a good recruiter is the best way to help hiring managers hire.
yes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love
I
it.
like the silo conversation. I think it's a really good one. It's also like I encounter this in marketing all the time. It's like sales teams and marketing teams are totally operating in their own silos until you have someone who's able to bridge the gap and to connect the dots and be like, wait, why are we not talking to each other? We're
It's crazy.
absolutely critical to each other's roles. Like it just when I came into work, like I went into marketing within a small, I've only worked in smaller startups, but I see this at large that marketing and sales are just not connected. I never understood it at all.
I love it. Well, look, it's a great conversation. Guys, I want to know what you think in the chat. So use those little things, or I guess they could be medium sized or big sized things on your hands. We call them fingers, and type in what you think about this conversation. Let us know what you're thinking about. If there's anything we've missed or that article maybe didn't point out in terms of what you've seen work well with hiring managers, would love to hear from you. And if not, just say hi because we're a little bit lonely out there.
Yeah,
So
say
get out
hi.
there, say hi to us, tell us who you are. I think we're going to roll on to one of my favorite segments, the Global Report.
Ooh.
Good morning, Aline.
Good morning, Serge. I love this. I never know exactly who I'm going to see on the other side. I'm like, who is today? Who do we get to chat to?
It's always a surprise. I'm just jumping in and just to surprise you, and I
I
think
love it.
we caught on really
Fabulous.
quickly. So you're actually at home, which is very rare for you. Are you traveling? Or are you
I'm at
what's
home.
going
I'm
on?
literally at home for a few hours.
Okay.
And I'm getting ready to head up to Scottsdale to Talent Sphere,
Ah,
um, which is only a drive for me. So not that big of a deal. So that's the big one for this week. And then next week we've got our own launch stuff going on. So yeah, I'm trapped to this chair typing away. It's the deal.
well, let's start with that point. I'm really curious because obviously it's a big launch,
Mhm.
and I'm always curious what goes on behind the scene. Like, how do you get to a point that you feel comfortable in launching this and all the pieces are together? Like, give us a behind the scene look here.
Yeah, I absolutely will. I think it's a great question. I think one of the biggest challenges is there is what we're building, right? What gets built, what product builds, and the work they're doing to build that. And there's a lot. I mean, obviously, there
Yeah.
are months and months of focused effort on individual elements, right? So for us, that's included kind of building out architecture, infrastructure, connecting elements, putting all those pieces together. And from a communication perspective, what
Yeah.
I get from my end is kind of vision from them of what they think they're building or how they think it's working and what their early pilots are coming from. But from a product perspective, they're also looking at these individual elements. My job requires going in and taking a look at all of those and saying, okay, here's what this really means when we pull it all together. Here's how people can understand it if they're not in there coding it, which
Mm.
is that's there's a translation there, right? Not everybody. I know this is going to be a shocker for you, Serge. Even in our world, not everybody geeks out on the root of the technology even as much as we do, right?
Mm.
This is not what people live for. They live for, I have a job to do.
Yeah.
How does this going to help me do my job? How does this intersect in my current process? So that's what we end up doing. So I take what we see from coming from product, and PMM starts to identify, our product marketing team start to identify what individual components are. And then my team and I take a look at that and say, okay, this is how it impacts customers or potential customers. This is how their world is going to change. And we start to build out how to share that with people so they understand it and can connect the dots. And it's often making big choices and decisions around things like, just because something's ready, maybe it's not time to talk
Yeah.
about it yet because people won't understand what it is until it's
Mm.
connected to something else. How do you create the correlation between the product and the process and connecting those dots? So that's what it takes, a lot of that. And then the back end is all the nuts and bolts, which are things like social media posts, comms pieces, messaging documents, and all sorts of weird stuff like that that nobody gets too excited about except for me. I sit
Yeah.
here and away.
It
Yeah.
seems really stressful and frantic. So I'm sure after this, you're going to be really relieved.
No, because we just move on to the next thing.
Yeah.
Next
Fair
thing
enough.
comes. You have to be an adrenaline junkie to do this job. I will completely say that. You have to be an adrenaline junkie. And I only do it because I sat on the other side for a
Yeah.
very long time, being the recipient of people's version of what they thought I wanted to hear, how I needed to understand it to make it make sense for my business. And being on this side, I feel a huge sense of responsibility to make sure that we are very clear and helpful to people, and not just a whole bunch of fluff and marketing speak, that people can actually understand what this means and how it translates to them. So there you go. I have a bigger vision and mission for this, right? Which is to help people use stuff because this stuff is moving so fast. I mean,
So fast.
listen, Serge, the pace of change. I was just doing some work. I was looking at Mary Meeker's recent analysis. I don't know if you've read it yet.
No, I haven't.
She's the woman who years ago, before we all knew what the internet was, told us it was coming, and we all went, "What? What? We're doing this thing?" And now she's just put out a really interesting piece talking about where the evolution of AI is going and how fast it's happening. I think one of the things that impacted me the most was understanding that AI is happening so much faster because it has all of these rails and foundations underneath it, that the rest didn't have, right? So it's not just
Mm.
overnight. So it took 23 years for the internet to be 90% more usable outside for people outside of North America. It has taken Chat GPT only 3 years.
Well, think about it. When it came to the internet, we had to build a whole infrastructure, which was not only the technology infrastructure, but all the piping for it, right? Like all the
Right.
wires, all the connections, and
Right.
that's already in place for AI in most cases,
In
right?
most cases. And so what we're doing now is just turning on the water tap, right? And
Yeah.
figuring out where's the water pressure at. And I like that analogy because I think what we're also finding is we're turning on that water tap from a product perspective is where are the leaks,
Yeah.
right? Give you a great leak. I think this is when people need to think about strategically as they're starting to put these sorts of tools in place in their TA infrastructures. It's the data question. The story, and I'm not just saying the data we use to
Yeah.
support artificial intelligence, but how we're thinking about visualizing and looking at data and how it's utilized. Most of our data analytics, our indicators, our dashboards, they've always been very static in nature,
Yes.
right? They're about moments in time that we capture. As we're starting to see the evolution of how people are leveraging and utilizing intelligence differently through agents and bots that are gathering information and feeding it up directly, it's changing people's frame for how they use data to make decisions, and where that data is coming from, right? You're not in a world anymore where you can have a dashboard that goes out at the end of the month, and that's the thing everybody's going to make their decisions off of for the next 2 months, right?
Mm.
Instead, people are going to be looking at data or have access to data that's coming at them in the moment, which means what do they do with that? How did that change their process? How does that change your decision
Yeah.
making flow? These are some of the things that I think are going to change how we think about the process of talent acquisition in HR as we go forward.
Well, let's talk about that because when I was leading talent acquisition, one of the biggest challenges that I had was I had so much data. I had so
Mhm.
much data, I didn't have time, resources to be able to properly and analyze that data and present it to my senior leadership. It just felt like everything was after the fact. So you went 2 months and you realize, oh, darn, our time to fill is, I don't know, two
Right.
months. In reality,
Right.
our target date was 45 days or whatever the data point is, was always a kind of a snapshot
Of the
of
past.
the
It's
past.
always our data story has always been a story of what we did,
Yeah.
right? And so we were using, and that also meant that we were often using data to validate our hypotheses, right? To
Yes.
say, I'm going to tell you that if I do X, I'm going to achieve Y result. And I will prove that to you in a month when I'm able to look at the data. And then I would go and get the data, and we would spend all this time. I don't know anybody else, but I know I would spend all this time looking at the data going,
Yep.
how do I tell this story using this data to validate my hypothesis was accurate? Right. And then if we got more
Yeah.
advanced, we might go and look at that past back data and say, okay, I'm going to do some
Yeah.
critical analysis on it to determine what I could have done better. Right. But it's still looking at what was happening there versus what's happening today. Here's the challenge.
Yes.
Not only is that changing how what I can access in terms of data. So it means I have to change what I use data for. But all of the advances in how people are engaging are quickly changing. Meaning my strategies that I may design based on data that I'm looking at from a month ago, and for some companies 6 months ago or a year
Yeah.
ago, is not reflective of the experience and the way people are interacting today because they have changed so quickly. Our pattern of behavior changes so quickly. Great example. Everybody's on LinkedIn, right? We're all on LinkedIn. Obviously, we're watching this through LinkedIn. Like everybody's on LinkedIn. Has anybody noticed that the algorithm on LinkedIn has changed seemingly overnight? That it is now completely almost video based and live video
Yeah.
based. And by the way they're showing the video based, you don't get that big synopsis paragraph that we all used to get ahead of time and then the
Yeah.
video underneath. It's showing the video directly. So that's an example of how fast the systems are forcing our behaviors to change. So content creators are learning differently about how to share
Yeah.
and execute their behaviors. Think about what that changes in terms of how candidates are thinking about interacting with you, right? So their behaviors are changing on these platforms that they're leveraging and using, and now they're coming and talking to you, which means their expectation and experience is rapidly shifting. And if you're making decisions based on data and how they were experiencing you a month ago, you're going to have a challenge, right? So
Well, let's think about this. Let's go back to talent teams
mhm.
and think about just what we're used to and how quickly things, well, not quickly, it used to change pretty slowly. Now it's moving very rapidly, but we have a lot on our plates and just leveraging the data and figuring out how we can leverage AI to step up our game when it comes to data,
Mhm.
how we're sharing it, how do we make changes. It seems really overwhelming. What's your advice there? How should talent team start looking at this and how can they execute really quickly so they can bring value to the organization really quickly?
Yeah. So I think number one, we have to shift our paradigm of what we think data is used for. So we go back to that first question. It's no longer, let's say it's no longer about validating what I did, right? Instead, data is to help make decisions happen, right? To inform choices and decisions. That one paradigm shift immediately switches what type of data I'm looking at and how I serve it up. So now I start to figure out, if it's about helping inform decisions, what are the decisions that I need to help inform, and who needs to have that information? Now it's about, is it sourcers and recruiters who need information about candidates and candidate viability quickly? Or is it about hiring managers having quick consolidated data that helps them understand the candidates they're looking at in their shortlist to make quick choices and decisions to move the process faster? Like, what are your core decision points? And then how are you serving up that data real time to people? And then the second piece to this is, if we're serving up data real time versus retroactively, we now need to understand how we're helping people understand how to see and use that data, and what intelligence are we giving them. Because remember, when we're doing it retroactively, I told you, what are you doing? You're crafting your story with that data. You're telling people what to understand based on that data. If you're not sitting there having the time to do that, and they're getting data instantaneously served up to them through their companion bot or their chatbot, or et cetera, how are you serving it up to them in a way that provides them the intelligence on top of it to say, this is how you should be assessing this to make your choice or decision? So now you've got new elements that you need to start thinking forward on.
Well, the other factor is the core systems that we use in talent is the HCM and the ATS. And as we both know, these systems are a little bit antiquated, and they're changing, right? And
Sure.
it's a big part of what you're doing at Smart Recruiter. But if we look at what ATS say I'm leveraging, and it's not going to catch up, it's not going to be to the point that we can offer proactive data in that sense. Like, what do we do? I know you're doing something very special at Smart Recruiters that's going to change the whole paradigm of that. But is what you're doing at Smart Recruiters relating like to this massive change when
100%.
it comes to analyzing data?
Yeah, it 100% is, because it's about understanding that we need to think about this at a couple of different layers. Most of the systems we use today are built to process information or process data. Right? We capture and process data. We capture it on a form. We have fields. We translate those fields. It then turns into database, data, and we leverage that data for reports, et cetera. So first off, that becomes challenging. You have to do all of that kind of post data look. And even if I'm trying to serve it up real time, if I don't have a way to serve it up in the moment in which people need it, then I have a challenge. So the first thing we have to do then is take those systems, and there's lots of ways to do this. I'm not going to tell you there's only one way to do this, but there's lots of tools out there that are evolving in this space. But that's why we're starting to create experience layers, right? These experience layers, we used to have them. Some great friends out there who helped pave the way early on with those early chat bots, right? They were a little challenging. They're NLP based. They're hard to use and construct, but we did it for a reason, because it was creating that perception of experience up there, and people have learned how to use it. Now we need to connect those experience layers to that data collection and output layer so that we're getting the information back and forth. That's what's going to help us. And then the third thing we have to do is we have to look at how these systems are who they are supporting, who they are going after. So we started with those experience layers for our candidates because we had to try and solve that candidate experience. We all started there. Now we're starting to see more systems coming into place to create that real-time engagement and interaction, kind of support, experience support for recruiters. I think the open field for us is going to be around hiring managers in the business, because now we start to eliminate the middle ground and we start to go directly and working with people who are actually where some of the challenges are, because they don't do this day to day. They need the most help and support, the guidance. So I think that's where systems are going to evolve. I know that's where we're evolving. I think more are going to go that direction. So it's about understanding your system is doing what it's supposed to do, collect and organize the information, and they'll start applying new ways to do that. The tech people can give me all sorts of great examples of how they're putting all sorts of great data analysis systems in place and make all that stuff really cool in the underneath. What's gonna happen though is how do we get that information to people when they need it through that experience layer? How is that going to shift and change?
Lot of changes coming up in our world. I'm excited. I hope everyone that's watching, listening in the TA space and the talent space is excited, but it's a lot. So, in saying that, June 10th,
June
big
10th.
Winston AI launch. Everyone's
Yep.
excited. Please definitely check out, scan the code here. And also, you got to follow Aline on TikTok, Facebook, all of it, because you have become my AI guru in this space. I really appreciate your videos and what you're putting out there because I've learned a lot from it. So, Aline, always a pleasure. Thank you for joining us again.
Here. Thanks, Serge. Great to see you. See everybody
Great to
soon.
see you too. See you
Bye.
soon.
That's right. Get those coughs out. Whoever was coughing back there, I don't think anyone heard it. Well, we got a incoming call. We got Mr. Eric Stone with us. Eric, welcome to the show.
Good morning. Great to be part of the show.
Well, it's great to have you here. Why don't you, I know this is the first time we're meeting, so why don't you give us a quick introduction? Who are you? What do you do? What are you all about?
So, I always had a fascination with business. I grew up in the 70s and first got hooked on leadership when the USA Olympic team wins the gold medal, and was fascinated with, how do a group of amateurs come together to do this over the Soviet Union and eventually win the gold. And then my father was in business and gravitated to all his conversations after a long road trip, go to school for business, and then land on a company since the Boston Red Sox weren't hiring for general managers right out of school. I land on a company at that time, Enterprise Rent-A-Car, start out entry level.
Wow.
One of four people within a location, eventually had an opportunity to climb the corporate proverbial ladder to become an officer of the company and lead the Southern New England region. And from there made a decision to say, you know what, I'm going to retire. And in 2018, I did. And I thought I was retired for good until my passion of leadership kept coming. I made a decision I wanted to pass a message on, and I had something to give.
Love that.
And hence what gave me the opportunity to attempt to write a book, to eventually write a book, and use that as a platform to speak internationally now. And that has been my latest passion project, is trying to close the leadership gap that exists in corporate America.
All right, I got a ton of questions, but the first one is like, how, you retired. How long after retiring did you come back into the game? And like walk me through that.
Yeah. So what happened is, all of a sudden, a lot of my either employees who became former employees, so they were with other companies,
Sure.
board members, I was on a few different boards. So my board members would, friends, family, whoever it is, would be reaching out to me. And it got to the point where I couldn't continually give the time commitment for free. At some point, these projects got
the picking your brain sessions where you're like, you know what, let me pick your wallet.
That's right. Let me pick your pocket a little bit, right? And it was pretty uncomfortable for me because I really just
you want
wanted
to give
give.
back. Yeah.
And then that, I always believed in management. While there's never really a quote unquote clear path, that was
Sure.
something that always I felt I was able to remove from my management team with some of the obstacles and become that distraction catcher. And hence Clear Path became an LLC. The book launched some speaking opportunities, and next thing you know, I'm at it to close that gap.
All right, so Jumpstart Your Workplace Culture. Give us, what's the book about? Who is this book for? And I guess if you had one, I'm sure there's multiple takeaways, but like almost like one thing that you'd want people to, kind of get out of the book, what would it be?
Yeah, I think it's for, HR leaders or team leaders would be the easiest version. Someone who's leading either a group of 5 or 500.
Yeah.
And I wanted to, I'm not an avid reader, but I read enough that I hate the complexities and complications and big words and proverbial kind of quote unquote fluffy stuff. And I just wanted to give a practitioner's guide.
Wow.
of something that was practiced for almost 30 years. And it wasn't just my approach, it was also a lot of interviews of some people in Fortune 500 companies. And so I wanted a simple approach, a practical roadmap that people could truly follow all the way through. And I wanted to prove that you could really measure culture if you utilize a few key things. So there were a number of things I really wanted to get out, because when I used to ask CEOs, how do you measure culture? There were always crickets. And culture was always a buzzword and it was misunderstood. And I wanted to bring it back to it is the catalyst to execution.
I love that. I love that. Well, talking about culture, is it possible to hire for culture, and like what does that look like? I'm really curious about this because I've seen the emphasis on culture fit, and now as we've kind of time's gone by, we've kind of transitioned to culture add. But I'd love to just get your kind of take on that and what that looks like within hiring.
Yeah. So for me, and it might be semantics, but fit, I always looked at it like a pair of shoes. I'm a size 9 and I'm looking for a size 9 when I go get a shoe, and that's the right fit. And I always wanted to get it, at the very least, the match or add as you're talking about. I wanted to have that tie that makes the shirt and everything else pop.
Mm.
And so those are some of the things. What I learned quickly is I made many hiring mistakes in the beginning. And what I found was I was only looking for one particular breed, and certainly learning about the diversity of thought and ethnicity and all of those, and gender, of how that makes you so much more versatile. I found a lot of psychology majors, for example, who were really good in sales, and those were really good hires. And so those would be people who thought much different than me. And I learned from just making mistakes of, wow, that person, and starting to understand who's really working out from where we're searching. And that helped me understand the importance of really not just looking at one specific thing. So I always looked for the match or the add that is going to complement everything. I don't need everyone thinking like me. I think the quote is, if everyone thinks the same, no one thinks, something like that. And so
Yeah.
I wanted that diversity.
What you mentioned, and you mentioned this earlier in the conversation, distraction catcher, I think is the term.
Yeah.
So like what are some of the distractions that happen, and what are some of the things that you think get people really focused on, that are really distractions, are the wrong thing to be focused on? I think you might have just touched upon this, but I'm curious to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there's a number. I mean, I think the one that everyone relates to and can understand would be the overabundance of the meeting piece. And we ended up coming right when I took over a new region. Was a way we created a meeting matrix. And so whether it's emails, meetings, those are pretty standard, that there's just way too many and they're unproductive. And so we created a meeting matrix, and we aligned, how many meetings do we have? How long are they? Are they achieving the actual outcome and driving the right behavior? And the ones that weren't got thrown overboard, as we say, into the sea, and move that aside.
What was the percentage of those meetings, do you think?
I'll give you one example. We used to have a staff meeting every month that went to 2 times a year. So we shed, 10 staff meetings that were, in my opinion, useless and just argument sessions. And we'd argue over the same thing that we weren't doing. And it was unproductive.
Yeah.
And so the other is just this flavor of the week management style. And that was really a challenge for whether I'm consulting or whether I was in the middle of it in my own. Is what exactly are we focusing on? And what are those 3 to 5 key initiatives? I used to call them commitments or big rocks. That must be the staple of all of our training material, and avoid the other noise. And how do we take, instead of the rocks, the sand was the noise. And we taught our team how to handle some of that sand through time management tips. And that was a big one, is people just didn't understand the importance of managing their day, and would always be overwhelmed. And sometimes it was on me because they needed more people. And sometimes it was on them because they couldn't manage their typical day from peak plan or non-peak plans. So those are just a few things that, that could exist. We had complexities with documentation. I mean, everyone got documented for everything, and then documentation meant nothing. And I wanted it to mean something. And so all of these things, policies and procedures, really have to be looked into.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I'm curious too. When you're scaling a company, and I've often wondered this, so often you go onto a company page, and it could be a massive company with hundreds of thousands of locations. tens of thousands of employees, and they managed to boil down like culture page or like the career page into like one thing. So I'm just curious, like when you look about scaling a company culture, how do you actually do that? And just keeping in mind, like everybody kind of has a different experience.
Yeah.
They could like, hey, I've got a manager that maybe doesn't represent the culture. So I guess how do you really scale that out? What have you seen effective?
So I'll go two different angles. I mean, I think the first thing was a system within the organization. We ended up developing something as simple as a think tank. And what this was is the managers of these 50 some brick and mortar enterprise stores at the time would nominate up to 5 to 7 people who would meet with me every other month. And these were big thinkers. You had to be a performer. That's the only thing I would rubber stamp, is they had to be a peak performer. And we would meet every other month. So it was nominated by their peers. So the peers were bought in. They would meet with me, a few rules of engagement, polite disagreement, your agenda. I'll maneuver it a little bit. I would say some of our greatest initiatives, strategic direction, came from those who were in the field. Those were our voices. Those became the mouthpiece of the region. Those would be the ones who would help me carry, outside of senior leadership, the message. And their job, if they wanted to remain on that think tank, was to establish the word. And so it wasn't necessarily my vision, it was our vision. And they were the ones who would cycle in and out of this opportunity. And I knew I had something special when I had a training class of younger employees, newer entry-level employees. And one raised their hand and said, hey, Eric, how do I get on the think tank? And those are some things, those were my culture carriers. Those were those who were helping me scale what we were trying to do. Now, you can't underestimate the hiring and training and all of those things that allow you to have the right people on board. But that was one really important thing. The other is our philosophy in order to scale. We lived on these 5 factors of engagement. And really quickly, it would be, are we developing a strong relationship with our management team? And what are the 2 or 3 initiatives under relationship building, from hiring and onboarding and training, that live a strong relationship? The second was just clear communication of goals and expectations. I think it's over 60% of people have no idea what their true goals and expectations are. Pretty powerful. And we wanted everyone to have a role and star in that role. And the third, right material, equipment, and information in order to achieve the desired outcome. You can't just say, hey, do your job. That just doesn't work. You got to give them the right material and equipment and information in order to achieve that desired outcome. We wanted to establish personal, professional relationships and unlock people's potential. Again, under each one of these, you better have 2 to 3 initiatives within your organization. And then the last one was recognizing effort, but rewarding excellence. And how many things are you recognizing and rewarding?
I love
Those
that.
help the fundamental part of what you live. Those 5 would be part. If you were going to interview, you better educate us on how you have lived those 5 factors. You better understand them. You better show examples of it. From interviewing to just training classes, it was our job to lather, rinse, repeat that consistently. One simple message consistently talked about through training, all the way through hired or retire, we called it.
I love that. I actually think that'd be great for job seekers interviewing as well, because I think in all of those 5 things, I just think about companies that are investing into their people, who are aware of that. Um, it's just so much in there that I think every company could take away from, right? And like if you're interviewing for a company, understanding those 5 areas and going, hey, how do you actually demonstrate that and live that out? So look, there's so much more that we could talk about. Clearly, I feel like we could dig into each one of those 5 areas for like 20 minutes, which is what I'm sure the book does as well, which is awesome. So where can people connect with you? Where can they find the book? And where's the best place for people to connect?
Best place to connect is on LinkedIn. You could find the book at any bookstore near you, Amazon. You search, you should find it, from a library to the bookstores of Barnes and Nobles throughout the country.
Love it. Well, Eric, it's been a pleasure. Hopefully we can get you on the show again. And I'm looking forward to getting a copy of the book as well and reading through it. Tons of value here. And thanks so much for your time.
Great to be part of it. Thanks again.
Thanks, Eric.
Bye.
Hey, Jeremy, how are you today?
Hello, how are you?
I am doing great. So, for folks who don't know you, can you give us the short, like, quick elevator pitch?
Sure. My name's Jeremy Mancheski. I'm the CEO and founder of a company named OutSolve. We specialize in data analytics, employment posters. We own a business called Labor Law Center. All those posters you see up on your break room wall, good chance we sent them to you. And of course, we do I-9 compliance. Started the business in '98 doing affirmative action plans, but as many of us know, that's changed a little bit.
Yes, I was about to say you guys are probably very, very busy this year in a different way than you have been for all of these years. So I'm excited because today we're going to talk about all of these changes, but specifically about EEO1, which has been around, I believe, since the 60s, probably 65, but it's back in the news. It's all the talk right now. So before we dive into what has changed, can we talk a little about like why EEO1 is important to begin with?
Well, sure, and you're exactly right. The EEO1's been around since the mid '60s. If you look at what that form actually is, you think, wow, it's a pretty two-dimensional form. We're looking at race and gender in different categories, different employment categories, and we're looking at the locations where you have staff. I remember doing these forms for those of us old enough, doing them actually by hand with carbon paper. That's how long they've been doing these. Of course, now it's an electronic submittal. We actually submit thousands of them a year on behalf of customers. It's a pretty straightforward form, but I think it has a renewed value and interest.
Yes. Um, who has to fill out this form? Is it every company?
Pretty much any company with at least 100 employees, 50 if you're a federal contractor, subcontractor.
So, what has changed this year? Like, why is everyone talking about this thing that's been around since the 60s?
Well, what's changed is actually not much, but the approach and why we're doing it, and what the potential impact could be is I think very significant. Rewinding a bit, of course, going back to a day in late January when the new administration comes in, changes some long-held principles related to affirmative action planning, specifically the rescission of Executive Order 11246. No longer are we doing affirmative action plans. And how does that relate to EEO1s? Well, a company would complete an EEO1 report, and that would be the primary driver of audit selection by OFCCP, the Office of Federal Contract Compliance Programs. By the way, as of a budget reveal of sorts last Friday, OFCCP will cease to exist later this year.
Wild.
Amazing.
Yes.
Really in trying times. But now the EEO1 form, which candidly, given the rescission of the executive order, I think if you would have asked me even a month ago, are they going to collect EEO1 data, I would have said no. I would be surprised. And I was talking specifically about an unbroken 50-plus year line of data collection that would go away this year. But lo and behold, it didn't. And what did we learn in determining this year's collection? Well, we learned that a company would not have the option to submit non-binary gender. Candidly, they never really had that before, but this administration wanted to make it clear that non-binary gender just simply isn't acceptable and won't work. And as many of us struggle with state requirements that might conflict with federal requirements now, this is, depending on what state you're in, you might have a different gender, candidly.
Yeah.
So the data collection period, what else did we learn? Last 50 years, depending on, for a very long period of time, this EEO1 process was right as rain. It would start in the beginning of July, go through the third quarter. There would be extensions usually into November, even December for filing, and then follow up for those who didn't submit. This year, it's very clear. The period would open. It opened a couple of weeks ago, and on June 24, it is closing, period.
Yeah, and they've specifically said, like, no extensions
No
this year.
extensions.
I
That's
was
it.
like you, I was also surprised that we're even doing it this year with all of the other changes. What do you why do you think we're still doing it?
Well, let's look at what's happened in the last week or so. Uh, OFCCP goes away, but also you have our Attorney General, Department of Justice, Pam Bondi, who sends out a memo called the the Civil Rights Fraud Initiative.
Mm,
Okay, that's looking for whistleblowers, and I'm going to explain in a second. But I think the EEO1 potentially could be a vehicle to document what Department of Justice is looking for in terms of illegal DEI or instances where they feel companies have overstepped with non-meritus based employment practices. Merit-based employment is the buzzword, and this administration has made it clear that race and gender should not be a factor in any way for employment. Thus, the term illegal DEI and the attack on those practices. Well, the EEO1, given the data that's submitted, could indeed give a bit of insight into a company's practices. So, possibly, maybe one of the last presenters on this podcast was talking about the uses of AI.
yeah.
Could this administration use AI to parse through large amounts of data to find worst offenders, for instance, based on the EEO1 report? And of course, would love to discuss the False Claims Act and this new
Yeah.
AG info.
Yes. That's where I wanted to go, but I mean, what you're saying and not you directly, but it's like a very dangerous thing. It's like how this data could potentially be used because what's going to be the criteria to determine that you are not complying? Like, um,
I still
so
don't know the definition of illegal DEI,
I
but
know, I think
yet
we're
we're
all,
not supposed to do it. I didn't think we were supposed to do anything that was illegal, but illegal DEI is apparently also frowned upon.
yeah. So let's talk about the implications under the False Claims Act, and like for people who are not familiar, what is the False Claims Act, and how does it tie into all that we're talking about right now?
Sure. First of all, not going to claim to be a lawyer. I am not. I'm a business consultant. But let's talk about the generalities of the False Claims Act. False Claims Act is designed to say that anyone who's taking money from the federal government should not make any false claims to get the contract or to get that award from the federal government. So effectively, don't lie to get the contract. Uh, it is being utilized in this context to suggest that companies who are certifying that they do not have any illegal DEI practices, who may indeed have illegal DEI practices, are effectively using a false claim in order to get their share of the government coffers. In fact, there is a provision called the qui tam provision, and this is where it gets really scary for businesses out there, and where I think there's real exposure. This new civil rights fraud initiative goes very far to say that the Department of Justice can't do it alone. We need the public's help, whether that be from existing employees of companies, customers, heck, bystanders. I wonder if there won't be a personal injury type bar approach to this as well,
Yeah.
where the qui tam provision looks for whistleblowers. If you see illegal DEI, for instance, going on in your business, report it to Department of Justice. That's the intent here. And the damages received will be shared with the whistleblower. Okay? So, and the damages aren't just straight damages. Hey, I see, this amount of discrimination. We can prove these amount of claims, and there's an award. It's actually treble damages, so 3 times the amount, with a share of that going to the whistleblower. So there's incentive to seek these claims and also to process. I mean, a lot of unknowns out there. For instance, how is Department of Justice going to process these?
Yeah.
How are they going to proceed? My understanding is a lot of these types of claims wind up getting settled because of the threat of treble damages. But it's a real threat to every organization out there right now.
It really is, and I think we need to go back to one of the things that you said, which is how do you even define illegal DEI? And this conversation has been amazing, and I think we could go on and talk about it for a long time. And I do hope that you come and join us on this show again and other of our shows to talk more in depth about this. How can people connect with you if they want to continue the conversation?
Sure. OutSolve.com is our website address. My email address is Mancheski, Mancheski, at OutSolve.com. And I answer all my emails and look forward to starting some conversations.
Amazing. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
All right. Amazing conversation. Appreciate all of the insights. Would love to know what you guys are thinking about the conversation. Get in the chat, say hi to us. If you're out there, if you're a new viewer, welcome. I want to give a special shout out to our sponsor, Erin. If you're not familiar with Erin, Erin is the #1 employee referral network in the world, and basically what they do is help companies develop an employee referral program using technology, make it really, really easy for your employees to get out there, share your brand, and get some of those really, really tough to fill positions filled. One of the things I love about referrals is a lot of times you're going to know the character of somebody. You're going to know, if they're someone who would fit into the organization. So employee referrals are massive. And especially for some of these really tough to fill roles and like healthcare, manufacturing, we know that these roles are really, really tough to fill. I know as a recruiter. So I love the work that Erin's doing. You can also get a hold of some red shoes, some sloths as well. If you don't have a sloth, you need to get a sloth. You can do that by going to www.erinapp.com/red shoes. And if you're at any conference and you see red shoes, more specifically red Puma shoes, you know that Erin Crew is there. So make contact with us, see what we do, see what Erin does. Love the guys, love what they're doing. And we just are really, really grateful that they are able to support the HR Morning Show, Mike Staffy and team. So shout out to Erin and get those red shoes.
Good morning, beautiful HR people. Today we're forecasting some really stormy weather coming for one of the most impactful companies in our space. Big news came out yesterday as Chris Himes is stepping down as CEO of Indeed after nearly 6 years at the helm. He had a farewell post. He reflected on the honor of serving, which is kind of funny, and admits it's time to simply pass the baton. And that baton is going back to my man Deco, the former CEO of Indeed and the current CEO of Recruit Holdings, which, by the way, is the parent company of Indeed and our other company, Glassdoor. So now let's be real. Indeed, skies haven't been sunny recently. They this also applies to most companies in the job advertising industry. It seems like everyone is struggling. Over the past couple of years, Indeed has suffered a lot of layoffs. They've done a product pivot that has really missed the mark. Actually, they've done a couple of product pivots that have missed the mark, and they have growing challenges with how companies and job seekers are seeing them in the world of AI, and also just there's just a whole slew of challenges when it comes to applying for jobs. We're all hearing the stories about being ghosted. Indeed is a factor in that. But if we go back in time a little bit, in 2023, they moved from a cost per click, which was really the standard. It's kind of the standard they brought to the market instead of duration based advertising. And they moved to pay per application. It was a bold move, but it didn't work. Advertisers hated it. It confused everyone and was just really poorly executed. And most importantly, it didn't solve the quality issue at all. I think what we're seeing right now is even less quality in the whole job advertising space. But that goes back at the control. I think there's hope for a course correction. He's the guy that initially helped Indeed scale into what they are today. But I guess the big question is, can Indeed reclaim relevance in an era of agentic AI and quality first hiring? The weather ahead for Indeed, it's uncertain, but Indeed is so dominant in this space that they do have a chance to turn around under this new leadership and get back to the core foundation, which is helping people get jobs. That's your HR forecast. Let's go back to my co-host. Do you guys care about this? Do you guys care that Indeed is changing their CEO? I guess is the first question here.
Yeah.
Not really?
No, I mean, I think in terms of an industry, it's obviously a big deal, right? Indeed is a massive name in our industry. I think they've been a staple. I think when people talk about job boards, they're in the top three that people mention. Um, it's always one of those things where, like you said, the uncertainty of like what's to come in the future. That's what I pay attention to, right? Like, what's the game plan for the next 3 to 6 months? I doubt the CEO that's come in is going to be there forever. It sounds like that's just it's like an interim manager of the
Yeah, I think
business,
it is.
making sure like, hey, this maybe was unexpected. Let's have someone that knows the business, that's held this, that has respect within the company to kind of take over
Mm.
till we find a replacement. Um, but obviously, like you said, it's been a tough time. They've changed their way that they've done business a number of times, how they've generated revenue. Obviously hasn't landed well with a lot of core company or core clients. So I don't know what the future holds. I think I think the job market as a whole isn't really looking favorable. Hiring as a whole isn't really looking favorable to a lot of recruitment companies. They've suggested being a recruitment company or like that Indeed Flex and those types of things. Haven't heard too much about that. I was never really that optimistic about that. I think recruiting is tough. So those are my thoughts. Fragmented thoughts, but some thoughts.
Rona, I'm curious. With everything going on, we're hearing all the stories about being ghosted, and one of those factors was Indeed. When Indeed launched Easy Apply or One Click Applied, it just created having people applying to as many jobs as possible. Then you add into the tools now with Lazy Apply that you can literally apply to thousands of jobs. But do job seekers trust job sites anymore? Like, do they trust them?
I mean, I don't think so. I think more importantly, I don't think recruiters, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself as a former client of Indeed, it's been a while since I personally could trust Indeed, and the quality of what they were bringing. And then all that was happening, all the changes and the structure of how they were charging. And I mean, Indeed, Glassdoor, all of them, like all of them were going through a period. Like I remember telling coworkers, like they're going through some stuff, and maybe I didn't say stuff, but yeah, like all the changes. So it does matter that who is leading it, because not only because Indeed is so big, but because many of the other companies follow what they do.
Yeah.
And back to your question about job seekers, yeah, if they are really setting the tone on how things are done in this industry and people are following what they do, and job seekers aren't really trusting them, then what does that mean for our industry? But also, it's such a bigger issue.
Yeah.
Job seekers really don't have a choice, though.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if you think about it, when I look for job, especially earlier in my careers, I would go to jobs like Indeed and apply for jobs there. But I think it's changing. I
Because
think
it
Gen Z
worked.
coming in the marketplace is like, no, like I got to
Yeah.
find a different way. What's your take here,
It
Danielle?
used to work. Like,
It
I
used to.
hear stories about, people going into their jobs and their early careers and they're like, "Oh, I just applied through this job site and I got this job." And it's like you never hear that now. Like,
Yeah.
I most often hear I got this job through my network, which I think is around 80% of people. And then I also hear where the trust is shifting is communities
Yeah.
Mhm.
Good point.
and and email newsletters. Like, I subscribe to two specifically: Generalist World, and Ben Lang's newsletter, and both of those are like the most trustworthy newsletters for like underrated, roles that are open, that are maybe cross-functional, that really align with my skills. So that's what I would say is like the trust has shifted. I think specifically during COVID it started was through communities where people were like, "I'm hiring, I'm looking for a job," and like sharing that. Every Slack that I was in had a jobs
Mhm.
channel. So I think that's where the trust is shifting, and then also obviously social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I used to work for Indeed, and one of the things that I always found interesting is, say I was wearing my Indeed gear anywhere. I remember wearing the "I help people get jobs." You don't know how many people would come up to me and say, "I actually got my job from Indeed." It happened all
Wow.
the time, and I'll tell you, as an Indeed employee, it felt really good. Like, you really
Mm.
felt like you
Saw the
made a
impact.
difference, right? Like, you're
Yeah.
working for a company actually trying to solve a problem. But I think things have changed so dramatically in how people trust job boards, how they apply for job. They've been ghosted. Like, there's a lack of trust in the whole ecosystem right now. And I think it's going to be hard for Indeed to recapture that relevance they had in the past, because job seekers coming into the marketplace are looking at different ways, because it just doesn't work the same
I
way
can't,
it did.
Serge. I cannot believe. Look, I'm gonna be straight up here. I think I helped you get your job, or like whatever that mantra was. That's trash. That's not even how they. That's not who's giving. Where are you making your money from? That's
It,
they're helping businesses find people. The job board was there, and I think having that messaging is ultimately what curses you, because
Yeah.
when it starts to become ineffective, like Danielle says, and your mantra is still, "We're helping you find a job." As soon as that stops working, then you're screwed. And so I
Yeah.
think that it's like ZipRecruiter, when they're like, "Oh yeah, we make recruiting easy." Well, if you actually don't, then you're not gonna be successful. Like, that's not what you're
Yeah.
doing. And I think it also doesn't help recruiters, because then people think, "Oh, a recruiter's job is to help me find a job."
yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah.
That
Well, I'll
narrative needs
admit,
to
I drank the Kool-Aid. I
Yeah.
was a
Yeah,
company
because
guy,
when people are
right?
coming up to you and reinforcing it and going, "Hey, thanks so much," but you're like, "Well, actually, we made money from the business because they're the ones that paid to post the post."
Oh, and I'll tell you, we made a lot of money. Like, it was crazy. Like, it was one of the most profitable experiences that I've had in any job, because Indeed was just
They're
ramping up
killing it.
so quickly and scaling and working on the sales side of it. I was pretty happy. I was
I
happy wearing that T-shirt. So I'll drink the Kool-Aid if you pay me enough.
I feel
And
like all these companies that are like trying to, survive, I think in this economy and in this new world that we're living in, like they have to go back to the basics, which is product and
Yeah.
customer and how people interact with your product. That's why like Handshake is making this big bet, and they're actually trying to transition into more of a social media platform where people share their experiences and internships, and like very social forward, very community forward.
That's what we
I don't know.
need. We need another social media site.
I don't know if that's going to work, to your point, but also to the point of like people constantly are shifting through and like cycling through college. So the odds that you actually get people to stay are very low. But I think the idea is there of like shifting from, this old school way of here's a job post, here's their careers page, apply to this job, like expect to not hear back, to how can you actually interact with other people and start to network and build, something that could lead to another something.
I'm making a prediction here. We're gonna see a renaissance to more like in-person stuff. It's
Yeah.
the internet right now is just it's full of AI. It's full of like information that can't be verified, and it's like it's getting to a tipping point. And I'm coming as a content creator. I make most of my money from online stuff, but it's just reaching a point where it's getting to a point
Yeah.
where like I think there's going to be a huge push to like in person and like real connection. I think we see like things like the interviews not being done virtually, and they're going to be in the office because you can't even verify who's on there. And I'm making that prediction. I think in person
Heard it here
trust
first.
is going to be it's going to be massive, and I think there's going to be a massive push away from just like I think the only thing I could see with social media is getting away. Somehow, someone comes up with a social media that's so not focused on media and is focused on the social interactions. But we have that. It's called get out and meet people.
I
You could
think
do
we're gonna
a
see a shift. Like, first, people might go full blown, like, in person, but the reality is
Balance.
we're not going back to that. I think it's gonna be more of a mix of, like Danielle was saying, going back to community. That's really what's happening. So, like, the smart companies are gonna invest in communities, and yes, it's gonna be online, but there's always gonna be the push to
Yeah.
do something from this online community in
Good.
person. So there's
Yeah.
gonna be I think that's where we're gonna end up.
I like how you
Yeah.
brought that balance there. Like I'm like,
Yeah,
here's a
I love the
prediction.
balance.
The internet's ending, and you're like, well.
It's like you could tell he's a TikToker.
Yeah. I just get in a rant. You ever notice
Any
that, like,
votes for Purple Acorn hiring fair?
purple
No,
high?
I will
purple
never
acorn.
do a hiring fair ever
I know.
again. I'm against.
Yeah, we'll
It's against.
advertise it. We'll help you get a job, and then Serge, you'll be
Help
the
you get a
face of
job.
it, and I'll just be like, I
JK.
help you get
Okay,
jobs.
I'll wear the T-shirt. I still have the T-shirt, so I
I'm sure
can
you'll get a
definitely wear it.
totally different reaction from that T-shirt now.
Yeah, that would have been that would
I
be a
think I
great
will.
video, like showing you down the street, like whenever you work for them, like getting like all the celebration, and now walking down the street, people are just like slapping you, like easy
Giving me the
apply.
middle finger.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I think of like LinkedIn's another great example of this, right? Like I often think like a lot of like what they built things on is like connecting one another, and then it's like connecting, but only to a certain point. Like we'll connect
Yeah.
you, but like if you want to message someone, got to pay a premium, and it's just like it's funny because people will be like, oh no, like I remember people used to post like, yeah, LinkedIn, it's like it's a great place, for people to connect, and it's like kind of morphed into like basically now what I'm consider like kind of like a TikTok thing. It's like
Pay to
again
play.
focused on the media, like you said, Rona. Like
Yeah.
it's not niche down community, which it's crazy. It's crazy.
Well, with that in mind, we have a little message from our friends at Humoriso.
At Humoriso, we're not just another HR consultancy. We're a team of dedicated experts wanting to bring your business forward. Our Humoriso Technology Solutions, HTS, are a different kind of HR tech. Give real-time insights without overwhelming managers with too much data. So whether you're a growing startup, an established company, our human resources outsource support, payroll management are all there to help drive your business forward. So check us out and see what Humoriso could do for you today.
Hello. It's so
Hi.
good to see you. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
And so let's just start off with sharing with anyone who doesn't know who you are. This is Diana, and she is incredible. We met at ERE
That's right.
like last month, I think, or now a month and a half ago. So can you share with everyone who you are and what you do best?
Yeah, co-founder CEO of Upwage. So I would say 80% of my time is spent building AI agents with my team that decrease turnover, that improve quality of hire, that do all the crazy rad stuff that AI can do today. Super impact driven. So our ultimate North Star mission is building an AI safety net for the entire workforce. And I can tell you how that works as well. And then the other 20% of my time to counterbalance the intensity of AI world and the screen is spent hiking with my dogs in the mountains, free diving, and playing piano.
So incredible. And I feel like one of the first conversations we had at ERE was literally about your hiking endeavors and we were in Las Vegas and you were like, oh yeah, I spent most of the day like hiking in the mountains. Can you share with everyone about your passion for this? I think we need to
Yeah. So what happened? I was on this road tour doing the book tour, right? So we just wrote this book on how to use AI for good, and specifically within hiring. And so we're doing this conference series. We're in 7 different cities, like which means I have to travel all the time. And I'm like a hermit. So I used to be an extrovert, and then like 5 years ago, I became an introvert. Went through some pretty intense journeys that I'm not going to talk about right now. But yeah, so essentially, I love being in nature because it's where I feel most at home. And so I was on this crazy conference tour and in Vegas and walking in. I love ERE and I love the community there. That just love, but. Walking into a casino is like my least favorite thing ever. I was like, red
It's the
lights,
worst.
this is the worst. So
Smells.
yeah, 5:30 a.m. on the day I'm speaking, I was like, I'm out. I gotta go to a national forest or something. So I ended up at Red Rock Canyon, and I was there before it opened. And so then I was like, well, I have a choice now. I can break into a federal park, or I can wait until it opens. And so I was like, well, I'll break it. The only problem is it was dark, and so maybe I shouldn't be telling the story. Anyway, so it was it was dark, and
Too
I didn't
late.
realize it was barbed wire. And so I walked straight into the barbed wire, like tore up my legs, and then climbed some fences, hypothetically, and ended up in the park for like an hour and a half, 2 hours, just running around hiking wild, and then had a great speaking session later that day.
So insane. It was like, and you had told the story, and I literally thought you were joking. Like, it's something straight out of a movie. It's wild.
I have many like this. At every city that I was at speaking, I managed to find myself a new nature adventure, and that's how I stay alive when I travel.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like, I mean, it actually is such a great example of how you keep your life, more human and more grounded, especially as we're all sitting on our screens. So can you tell us a little bit more about the book and, what's the main message that you're trying to drive home?
Yeah. So AI for Good came out of, well, let me start from the very beginning. So
Yeah.
2.5 years ago, Greg, my co-founder, and I, we had been friends for a long time, so almost a decade. And so we met in the military transition space working with employment issues with veterans. And we basically had just come out of both of our ventures, and we were on what we called a learning journey. This was 2.5 years ago, and thought, what is the problem that is worth solving for the next decade of our lives? And Greg was doing his PhD in AI and labor markets. So before GPT came out, before the world exploded around AI, the two of us were freaking out about the fact that AI was going to be highly disruptive to all labor markets and job markets. And we're like, the world doesn't know it yet. And so our thought was, how do we use the power of AI to combat the disruptive impact of AI? So that was the genesis of Upwage. And so along the way, as we've been building, last year when we had deployed 7,000 plus AI agents across different kinds of companies, like every industry across all roles, we built interviewing and assessment agents. And what we realized really quickly was just that the narrative around AI was so focused on gloom and doom, and so focused on like, how do we automate everything and replace people? And Greg and I were like, this is not what we came here to do and spend 10 years of our lives doing. We came here to use AI for good and literally save people's jobs. So we decided to write the book to explain our vision of a future that's very different than most, I think, founders' visions of a future right now when it comes down to just purely capturing the economic benefits of AI. So AI for Good, it's actually written in a really interesting way. So each chapter starts out with a 2035 science fiction near future story of like a day in the life of a CPO that is using AI for good, or a recruiter that's using AI for good, or a candidate's experience in this world. And then we just reverse engineered it back to where the technology is today in 2025. And because we have a ton of like longitudinal transformation, like AI case studies, data driven, we also leveraged a lot of our data and then pulled in our head of AI to write all the technical breakouts, Evo Johnson. And so she's a genius. And so she wrote out a lot of the technical breakouts to explain the technicalities of everything that I don't
Wow.
fully. backend. So
I cannot wait to get my hands on this book. It sounds so incredible. And let's double click on what you were talking about before, which is the AI agents. Can you share maybe like a use case or something, that we can kind of understand and comprehend before we get our hands on the book about how AI can really enhance the employee experience and maybe reduce turnover? Like, what was one of the use cases?
Okay, so one of, I think, the most brilliant applications of the technology that we've built was with the chief people officer at a healthcare company that had extremely high turnover in their call center reps. And so the issue was that they had been using assessments for the last 5 years and really trying to figure out, like, can assessments decrease turnover? They couldn't move the dial on it. Turnover was around 53%. And so with 64,000 applicants a month, essentially what we ended up doing is split testing. So we split test their 64,000 applicants. Half of them used the assessment, half of them used UpWage's AI interviewers. What we did was we built our interviewing agents and assessment agents to essentially be predictive of like high retention competencies. And just I have to give a little bit of context around the way our agents work. So we pair our agents together. They're a duo. They work together in pairs for every single role. They're customized to every role. The interviewer is not a chatbot. So if you think about what about a screening agent, this is like a advanced behavioral interviewer that is trained to do star interviewing and probing and follow-ups. It's incredibly emotionally intelligent to the point where we added a scoring system for candidates on the back end of the interview, and 17,000 candidates gave it a 9.02 score because they leave it out of 10. And the feedback back was just like, this is an amazing way to interview. And so essentially we pair our interviewing agent with an invisible assessment on the back end called the analyst agent. The analyst agent is something that we built because we had too many interviews happening and recruiters didn't have enough time to read all of our interviews. So we essentially like accidentally created a competitive product to the entire assessment space. And that analyst agent reads every transcript and then isolates out high, medium, low fits. Like, it's essentially scoring candidate transcripts based on competency and skills bespoke to that particular role. And the thing that has sort of driven massive growth at this point is we just released a new builder agent, which allows TA teams to build their own interviewing and assessment agents. It's the first of its kind. Yeah, so that's like ultimate customization. So I think, like, coming back to the whole retention thing. So this retention, the interviewing agents that we built and the analyst agents, we split test them and ended up with this, it was 53% turnover for the non-AI interviewed agents. It was 32% turnover for the AI interviewed candidates that were hired. And so we've seen this across multiple companies, like across different industries. The highest decrease in turnover that our agents have been able to deliver is 79% for a home services company recently. So it's been really amazing to see the quality of
That's a
hiring.
wild number.
Yeah.
Incredible. Well, as we sort of wrap up, I wish we had like so much more time than we do. I look at you as like such an inspiration as a founder, and like you don't live in the US, by the way, right? You live in Portugal, is that correct?
I split my time, but yeah,
Okay.
I spend a lot of my time here.
I see you as such an inspiration. So for any, I guess, any advice that you could share for like emerging entrepreneurs who want to build these types of tech solutions, that are really AI driven, that are very future forward, do you have anything to share?
Just solve a problem that actually matters. Like, the world is on fire and things are getting very intense in this world. There are many problems to be solved and there's a lot of help that we can create. And so I think, like, honestly, find the problem that's worth solving and dedicating a significant amount of your life to, and then just go do it.
Yeah, that was like the question that you asked your co-founder at the beginning, was what was the problem that you wanted to solve for the next 10 years?
Yeah.
Why 10 years?
10 years is venture scale. So like, if you're going to go get venture backing and then do the whole entire VC thing, it's going to be about a 10-year run.
Yeah.
If you're going to do it differently. But I think the core of it is life is too short to not do something that is truly worth doing in service. At least for me, has been one of just the core motivators in life. And so it's just, yeah.
On that train. I love that. Well, where can everyone find you?
LinkedIn, and just ping me on LinkedIn. Yes. Or email me, Diana@upwage.com. No, if you just reach out, I'll just send you an e-copy, a free e-copy of the book.
Oh,
Otherwise, you can buy it on Amazon. But yeah.
okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, everyone. Check out AI for Good. I'm sure it is such a great read. I will be getting my hands on it. And thank you so much, Diana, for joining us.
You're so
See
welcome.
you back
Thank
soon.
you.
Wow.
Whoa, we're at the end.
I know. Flew. It flew.
Was this the? I think this is the best show we've ever done.
I
'Cause
think my
Mona-
mind was just
Mona was
blown. I've never wanted to book more, actually. Wild. Just like, oh yeah, we're gonna share with you what 2050 looks like for every position. I'm like,
I will more than likely be a robot by then.
oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah, Joel AI,
realest
the realest
robot
robot
recruiter.
ever. Okay, well, look, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors, Erin, once again. If you haven't checked out Erin, go check them out. If you are looking to boost your employee referral program, if you're looking to get some red shoes, I mean, the only color I know that's better than red is pink. So maybe we need to get pink shoes. But anyway, go to www.aaronapp.com/red shoes. You see it right below. And then, guys, look, I just checked. Our follower count went up by 1. Okay, so I know there's
Whoa.
more than one person out there. We get hit
Joel,
follow.
that's influence.
That's influence. We want followers. So get in there, follow us. So if you're not following us, follow us. We put a ton of content out. It's not just this show, it's all of our shows. And if you want to see more of Purple Acorn, go to purpleacornnetwork.com. It's got all of our podcasts, all of our events, everything that we're involved in one place. So go check it out. And remember, we are a podcast. We've got lots of other podcasts. Go check them out on Spotify, Apple, YouTube, wherever it is that you
And Israel. So yeah, make sure to follow me. I know. The only OG. You're the workhorse. Yeah. Thank you. Love you.
so
Mazel tov. It was his daughter's bat mitzvah this past weekend.
well, there we
Became a
go. That's
woman.
exciting. How? Yeah, I'm surprised. Did he post about that, or are you
A
just
little
in
on
your?
Instagram. You have to be in
Instant.
the squad.
Oh, Instagram. God, how
Yeah.
many social medias are there? Anyway, well, guys, look, I want to thank everybody again. If you are listening to the show afterward, go check us out. Go check out the recordings, and we'll be back next week. So hopefully, see you guys all next week, and have a great morning.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.